So if I look back at my career before I became a coach, starting back right to the start, I had three older brothers, so I always had to find clever ways of keeping up. I think it also gave me a fascination with how people tick. So I think that's really what started my fascination with the broader area of development and performance. I then, in my first career, went into media and communications, where I worked for 30 years. For the last 10 of those years, I was in the C-suite as the CEO of those global organizations. And that's really what that was the springboard which led me to coaching. If I focus on my experience and my learning in terms of development to help people develop their leadership skills, transform how they show up, and are effective as a leader, for me, actually, part of this is beyond specific formal learning. Part of it is actually having lived in the shoes of a CEO, being a CEO, and having walked that journey. I think that physical experience of doing the roles is critically important. I think more than that, though, I am fascinated by learning. I'm fascinated by research into coaching and leadership. For me, that journey took me into a master's level study at Henley Business School, where I studied for over 4 years, coaching and behavioural change. That was probably the sort of the big foundational block. Since then, I've looked at a number of different psychometric profiling tools, and actually all my friends tease me about the sort of level of reading I do around coaching, psychology and leadership. So for me, it's not really just a job, it's a real passion. I'm really fascinated by this, and something I really choose to do. It's fascinating to think about the tools and approaches that people can bring to coaching. For me, every interaction is individual, every interaction is bespoke. So I think it's really important to understand all the different coaching approaches, methodologies and schools, be they Gestalt or somatic or cognitive behavioral or more traditional business coaching. Actually, an eclectic approach, I think, is far more effective. Each, as I said at the start, each coaching brief is different. It requires a bespoke approach to it. I think a lot of coaching interventions stay at a sort of surface or mid-level, um, and are probably preoccupied by what people are saying, by talk, and by analytical or cognitive change. Now, I think that's really valuable, but there are also much deeper levels of coaching. I think the very best coaching can migrate across deeper levels, can look at changes at more of an emotional level, but also about how people see the world and how that's physically ingrained in them, how they physically show up. We get a sense about people, we get a felt sense about people. And when people really shift and really change, it's deeper than just intellectual thoughts or language or the spoken word. If I look at the tools open to a coach, I think they're beyond just a cognitive behavioral approach or a systemic approach. I think there are also some really useful tools which can break out or fracture out of the coaching relationship where there's a danger that can be very inward looking. It can be just two people, and there can be a danger at times of sort of navel gazing. Tools which could be really useful there are tools like Hogan or MBTI or Insights Discovery to give people a more objective or a more scientific perspective on perhaps their strengths, development areas, and how they perform or show up under stress. Something else I also think is really useful is the line manager meeting and actually getting line manager feedback, as well as sometimes looking at stakeholder interviews. Stakeholder interviews can give us a whole new perspective on ourselves, and can be very, very useful for people. One of my core beliefs about coaching is it is so much deeper than just words. In a sense, words are just the popcorn of coaching. For coaching really to enable deep change, I think it needs to operate at a deeper level. And this is actually what I studied at Henley Business School and what my dissertation was on. And I was very lucky and very kindly awarded an award for academic excellence by Henley for my research piece there. Essentially there we looked at, again, going deeper than cognitive thought, going deeper than language. How can coaching really enable people to transform at that deeper level? So for me, that is about, as a coach, becoming deeply attuned with that other person, actually getting them to feel physically different about it, to emotionally to feel different about it. They have a real felt sense about the change they've made. One sense, this might sound sort of esoteric, but another sense, fundamentally, you're shifting how someone shows up. You're fist shifting their very sense of being. So people actually transform. They transform at a deep level, not just an intellectual level. It's hard to narrow it down to a single book, because again, each intervention is different. For me, if I shared perhaps three, so I think Man's Search for Meaning is a wonderful book written by Viktor Frankl. For me, the key part on that is around choice and intentionality, actually, and enabling leaders to realize actually they have a choice in terms of how they show up, how they behave, the actions they take. To really radically owning that feels really important. So that for me would be one great book in this area. For new leaders, The First 90 Days by Watkins, I think is brilliant. It's a sort of lovely um, series of approaches and series of tools for a new leader going into a new role, particularly at senior levels. And I found that really helpful for many people. And probably a personal favorite is a book called Upgrade, which is all around helping leaders embrace and step into complexity. It's a wonderful book there. It's almost like a how-to book where you step into it, you experience it rather than just something which is read. There's also an app for it. But really, it's about helping leaders lead in really uncertain times. I think it's a great question. What are the challenges leaders are facing now that perhaps they didn't face in the past? At one level, I would actually challenge the question. I think many of the challenges in some ways at a really foundational level are the same. If you look back at, say, a Roman emperor or a Roman leading a village, actually the core challenges were around people. How do you inspire people? How do you motivate people? And how do you actually personally have grit and resilience within yourself? And what's the order you're going to create? So in the past, the challenges were human challenges fundamentally. There were also technological challenges, but fundamentally human. If you look at it now, the world, actually, I think in many ways it is the same. The fundamental challenges are human challenges. Again, how do you motivate your workforce? How do you inspire them? How do you bring the best out of people? How do you get them to follow that vision? And I think if we look to the future, I think it'll be similar. I think again, the fundamental challenges are going to be human challenges. And with that, I'm not brushing aside digitization, AI, which are deeply important. But I think probably many of the differences that many leaders can make are going to be with motivating and empowering people. As I look back on my sort of relationship with coaching, it brings a smile to my face. I remember the very first coach I had, actually, I was quite resistant to, and it felt almost sort of confrontational. I remember him showing me my psychometric assessment and saying, "Matt, this can't be true because it says you're actually a good leader, and I know you're not." I found that very challenging and very triggering. So my first experience of coaching, I say, wasn't a powerful experience of coaching. It made me think, actually, how valuable is this? The second coach I have, I think, was fantastic, um, and yeah, it gave me just a new way of seeing the world, a new way of understanding myself, which I would never have had without it. It was deeply transformational for me, and I felt actually, in a sense, it had been something I've been looking for ever since I was very young. It was sort of a deeper way of understanding ourselves, understanding the work we do and the businesses that we operate in, and how can we be at our best within those. I believe my coachees would describe me as warm, empathetic, and someone who listens with real curiosity. Then that would be perhaps their foundational piece in it. I think then it would be around this probably duality, a duality of someone who'd walked in their shoes as a senior leader, who'd been a CEO for a period of years and had worked as a senior leader for many years, and also someone who's got a deep intellectual understanding and a deep fascination with coaching, with leadership, and with behavioral change. I think having a senior corporate career is really, really important. I think it enables me to make a massive shift in terms of how I operate with people I coach. I think at one level, people want to work with someone who has walked in their shoes, who's experienced probably some of the challenges they've already experienced, and actually can speak from experience. So I think it gives me an extra strand to work with, and it's probably a really big strand to work with. And for me, actually, and maybe I'm a little bit radical here, I feel the conventional definition of coaching is very, very narrow. I think no one shows up purely just to be coached. People actually show up to be supported and to be assisted in the challenges facing them. So for me, actually, coaching can go into more of a mentoring area if that's appropriate for an individual. It can be into more of a pure coaching area. But fundamentally, I think what people are looking for is a thought partner, someone who can actually really develop and evolve and help them evolve their own thinking. So I think we need to redefine the breadth of coaching and the power of coaching. I've coached probably now about 100 people who are at C-level within organizations. So again, I've got really rich experience on the challenges that people at that level experience. You need to establish a strong relationship, empathy, and also be a thinking partner for that individual. I think where it differs when people are on the C-suite, I think actually it's often quite hard for them to get genuine feedback from people who report into them. It can be very lonely at the top. So actually as a coach, I can provide that objective perspective. I think also probably provide greater degrees of challenge and greater degrees of scrutiny. And I think actually at that C-suite level, that is really required. I've coached a number of people who are new to the C-suite, so just been promoted to the C-suite. So the focus for the individual I'm thinking of here for him was actually, first of all, it was looking down, because actually you still are a team leader. Actually was getting his own house in order, his own team in order. And that was the first area of it. I think the rest of it was probably more in a conventional area that you would think for a C-suite leader. So it was around the stakeholder relationships he had, his relationship with the CEO. Also, this individual, it was an incredibly challenging time for the organization. It was probably the organization or one of the organizations over the last few years which has been in the public eye and under scrutiny. So many people I've coached have been recently promoted to the C-suite. There we look at a range of techniques which can help them. With this individual I'm thinking of currently, the organization was going through a really challenging time, and actually it was about giving him and equipping him with the resilience in front of the media to cope with that when day after day there were very, very difficult situations to be dealt with, which were very much in the public eye. The step up to C-suite requires a whole new range of skills for people. One of those skills is being able to operate at a much more strategic level and actually joining up different challenges across the business. People sometimes can be very siloed when they go into the C-suite, or before they go into the C-suite, they can look at stuff from a single function perspective. So actually training people to think much more systemically about the challenges facing the business. And that systemic thinking, I think, is a key attribute to people at that C-suite level. They don't need to be just able to run their own department. They need to be able to contribute at an enterprise level across the organization. I'm currently coaching another individual at C-suite level, a CEO. For her, some of the challenges are, again, around emotional regulation. So actually we have to manage ourselves, even if we're at C-suite level. Beyond that, there's some incredibly conflictual dynamics within that organization, both within the company, but also then at a non-exec level and at a chair level. And actually, how does she navigate those very complex politics and those very difficult conflicts within that organization? That's an area she's really looked for support on. There's someone who's recently been promoted to CEO level within a FTSE 100 organization. Again, he's credits the coaching as one of the vehicles which enabled him to make that transition. And for him there, we worked on a range of areas. We worked on his relationship with the chairperson in the organization. We worked on key stakeholder relationships, but also on emotional regulation. I think also step into being a transformational leader rather than what he called an activist leader. A lovely example of someone I'm working with currently, his background was very operational. He'd been very successful at an operational level. That had worked well. His new role requires him to be more strategic. So actually, how does he transform being an excellent operator to a real strategically minded leader? And that's been a core area that we focused on. We've looked at many different perspectives on that. At a very simple level, how does he spend his time, or all the way up to quite sophisticated or very sophisticated tools for looking at being more strategic.